Most men believe marriage is a union of equals, a sanctuary of mutual love and support. But this illusion blinds them to a darker truthing. The moment they say, "I do," they begin surrendering power, not through caution, but willingly, often with a smile. This is not a forced loss. It is a voluntary offering at the altar of emotional comfort, societal expectation, and misguided idealism. In the early days, he gives up small freedoms in exchange for intimacy and companionship. He begins to ask permission instead of deciding. He adjusts his routines, reshapes his habits, and softens his speech. What he once did freely, he now negotiates. This slow erosion of sovereignty is not immediately felt. It comes disguised as compromise, as maturity, as responsibility. But over time, the pattern is clear. The man gives and she takes. The more he gives, the more is expected. And because he gave without demand, he is now assumed to owe. It begins with trivial things. Where to eat, what to wear, how to speak in front of her friends. Soon it extends to how he spends his time, who he speaks to, and what ambitions he's allowed to chase. He becomes a subject governed by the mood of another, living by her rules, but pretending they are mutual agreements. This is not a relationship, it is a regime. Yet the most tragic part is not the woman's control, it is the man's consent. He offers his authority like a gift, believing it will earn him peace. He bends his knee, hoping it will win him love. But submission never inspires devotion, it breeds contempt. No ruler respects a subject who has no pride, and no woman respects a man who surrenders his will to avoid conflict. The very nature of desire is tied to strength, not obedience. A man who yields too quickly becomes invisible. His needs become secondary, his opinions become optional, his presence becomes convenient, not necessary. Yet he tells himself he is a good husband, a responsible man, a devoted partner. But in truth, he has become what all empires need to function: a compliant worker, a silent enforcer, figurehead without power. He is the perfect subject, bowed not by law, but by love weaponized against him. He does not recognize his own servitude because it was not imposed. It was chosen. He replaced his crown with a collar, thinking it would keep the peace. But what peace is there for the man who can act without approval? What victory exists for the man who has forfeited his right to command himself? In the end, he may own the house, but he does not rule it. He may provide for the family, but he does not lead it. He may be praised, but he is not heard. His sacrifice becomes his prison, his devotion his downfall. And all of it began the moment he confused surrender with love and silence with strength. Chains are no longer forged in iron. In modern times, they are crafted from emotions: guilt, obligation, fear of being unloved. Where once the conqueror used force to dominate, now the conqueror smiles, cries, and whispers soft commands that bind more effectively than any rope. A man in marriage often finds himself held not by what is said directly, but by what is implied. The sighs of disappointment, the tears of frustration, the cold silence that follows disagreement. These are the tools of control. He is not struck, he is sculpted, slowly molded into what she needs, not by command, but by reaction. He changes, not out of desire, but to avoid pain. This is not love, it is training. A man begins to regulate his own behavior as if living under surveillance. He anticipates her responses, edits his words, masks his emotions. He learns to avoid conflict not through wisdom, but fear. He chooses silence not because he has nothing to say, but because he knows speaking truth comes with emotional punishment. What is more dangerous than a cage? A cage one believes he chose. What is more suffocating than being silenced? Silencing oneself for the sake of peace. She does not need to demand submission. She only needs to create an environment where resistance feels like cruelty. His natural instincts are framed as selfishness. His goals are recast as neglect. His very masculinity is treated as a flaw to be corrected. She cries and he apologizes. She is offended and he adapts. She is dissatisfied and he questions himself. Slowly, she becomes the moral compass, the judge of right and wrong. And he, in his devotion, accepts her verdict without trial. He begins to live in her emotional courtroom, where he is always on trial and rarely acquitted. His intentions do not matter, only how she feels. And so, he begins to live not by truth, but by emotional law. He starts to seek her approval as a slave seeks his master's praise, believing it to be affection. But affection given as a reward for obedience is not love, it is manipulation. She might not even know she's doing it. Often, the chains are inherited, passed down by generations of women taught to control through emotion rather than dialogue. But the effect is the same. The man becomes an actor in a theater of expectations. He smiles on cue, apologizes on cue, retreats on cue. He learns to doubt his own thoughts and instincts. He forgets what he wanted before he was trained to care only for what she wants. And the most effective prisons are those without bars. He can leave, but he won't. He stays because he fears the label of failure. He fears judgment. He fears being alone. He fears becoming what society mocks, a man who couldn't keep his woman happy. So he stays, he performs, and he pretends that the life he's living is by choice, not by pressure. A man without strategy is like a soldier without armor, marching into battle with nothing but hope. In marriage, hope is not a plan, and love is not protection. Many men step into this arrangement with no vision, no principles, and no contingency. They are ruled by emotion, not by reason, and in doing so, they become easy to shape, easy to bend, easy to control. A man who lacks foresight becomes reactive instead of directive. He does not lead, he follows the current of her moods, the expectations of the relationship, and the invisible rules set by someone more prepared to shape the dynamic. He thinks kindness will be enough. He believes that effort will shield him. But effort without direction is servitude. She will test him, consciously or not. She will gauge his firmness, his resolve, his sense of self, and if she finds none, she will assume control, not because she is cruel, but because someone must. In the absence of leadership, power is seized. Nature despises a vacuum, and when a man cannot command, she will fill that void, not out of malice, but necessity. From there, he becomes a subject in his own household. He obeys more than he speaks. He adapts more than he asserts. He survives, but he no longer thrives. Without strategy, he has no boundaries. Without boundaries, he has no respect. She may ask him to change, and he does, without question. She may reject his ideas, and he recants them, without a fight. She may shape the vision of their future, and he complies, without negotiation. In his mind, he is being accommodating, understanding, loving. In reality, he is being erased. The man who cannot say no is never truly saying yes. His consent is worthless if it is given without choice. Strategy is not cruelty, it is self-preservation. They simply withdraw. It is knowing what you stand for before one convinces you to kneel. Men without strategy confuse surrender for peace. They believe giving up their principles will bring them happiness. They do not see that every concession chips away at their authority. He starts to feel resentment, but says nothing. He starts to lose passion, but hides it. He becomes hollow in his own skin, confused as to why he feels like a stranger in his own life. But the reason is simply he never defined his role. He never asserted what he expects, what he tolerates, what he will never allow. She cannot respect what is undefined. She cannot follow what does not lead, and she will not admire what bends with every breeze. Strategy means entering marriage with rules, not just vows. It means understanding leverage, the value you bring, the standards you uphold, the consequences you're prepared to enforce. A man with strategy doesn't need to dominate, but he must direct. He doesn't need to control, but he must govern. He must see 10 steps ahead, not just today's emotions. He must protect his time, his mission, his energy. Without this clarity, he becomes a ghost in the relationship, presence without power, a body without command, a man in name only. In the name of peace, many men betray themselves. They call it compromise, but it is sacrifice without balance. They give up their voice to avoid conflict. They suppress their desires to avoid upsetting her. They silence their instincts to maintain harmony. But harmony achieved through self-erasure is not peace. It is control masked as love. The modern man often believes he is noble for enduring this quiet suffering, that his patience and compliance make him a good partner. He tells himself that absorbing her moods, accepting her criticisms, and adjusting to her expectations is a form of maturity. In reality, it is the beginning of spiritual death. A man who cannot speak his truth without fear has already been conquered. His words become filtered, not by respect, but by anxiety. He watches her reactions like a subject watches a ruler, carefully gauging which moods are safe and which are dangerous. He lives not by what is right, but by what is tolerated. Slowly, he starts hiding pieces of himself. He no longer speaks about what truly matters to him. He avoids conflict by avoiding honesty. He becomes agreeable, neutral, empty. And while she may praise his sensitivity, deep down, she begins to lose respect. A man who gives up everything for comfort becomes disposable. His presence is constant, but his essence is gone. Peace is often bought at the price of power. In every household, someone sets the emotional tone. If the man abdicates this responsibility, it will be taken from him. She will set the rules. She will define what is acceptable. She will determine when issues are discussed and when silence is expected. And he, in his desire to keep things calm, will fall in line. He won't even recognize when he stopped leading. He'll believe they are making decisions together, even when every choice bends in her favor. He may think that yielding is a strength, but yielding without limits becomes servitude. The man who swallows his anger, who buries his ambition, who silences his instincts, does not become enlightened. He becomes broken. He begins to feel a quiet rage, not against her, but against himself. He starts to resent the role he agreed to play. He becomes passive, bitter, cold. But even this anger he cannot express, because doing so would shatter the illusion of peace he worked so hard to build. He continues the performance, hoping one day she'll notice his pain. But pain that is hidden is never healed, and silence never earns gratitude. He starts to forget who he was before the marriage. His dreams gather dust. His opinions become hesitant. His presence shrinks. And still, he calls it love. Still, he tells himself this is the price of being a good man. But a man who sacrifices everything to keep the peace loses the war within himself. A man who bends every time she pushes eventually forgets how to stand. And a man who betrays his own nature in the name of peace becomes a stranger in his own life. Freedom is not given to the man who desires it. It is taken by the man who prepares for it. In the realm of relationships, it is not brute strength that preserves a man's independence, but the quiet force of calculation. The man who keeps his edge sharp, who never forgets his value, who watches the game without becoming its pawn, is the only one who walks through love unchained. He does not romanticize his role. He does not mistake affection for loyalty, nor routine for safety. He understands that power, once given away blindly, is rarely returned. So he does not give. He negotiates. He weighs. He observes. She may want a man who listens, who loves, who commits. But she respects the man who thinks, who decides, who never becomes predictable. Predictability is the death of desire. When a man becomes too available, too agreeable, too tame, he ceases to be intriguing. She may claim she wants peace, but her nature craves strength. Not strength that dominates, but strength that commands presence. A man who stands firm without having to shout. A man who can walk away and means it. He is not reckless. He is aware of his worth. He enters love without desperation. He stays because he chooses, not because he must. This kind of man does not allow himself to be consumed by the relationship. He does not abandon his goals to become her emotional caretaker. He keeps something for himself. A purpose that does not revolve around her. A mission she cannot control. And this, more than flowers or promises, keeps her attention. A woman cannot fully control a man who does not need her validation. She cannot reshape a man who has already shaped himself. He becomes a force, not a servant. He earns love without begging for it. He commands respect without asking. The calculated man sets boundaries early. He does not wait until resentment poisons the well. He speaks plainly. He says no without guilt. He walks away from disrespect, not because he is cruel, but because he understands the long-term cost of weakness. Every moment of tolerated disrespect is a seed that grows into decay. He uproots it before it spreads. He protects his mind as he would a fortress. He guards his time, his focus, his energy. Not out of paranoia, but out of clarity. He knows that to be useful to others, he must first be loyal to himself. He never stops observing. He watches how she reacts to limits, how she responds to discipline. He watches her words, but more importantly, her actions. He does not fall for performances, he studies patterns. He does not fear solitude, he fears being bound to someone who poisons his spirit. And because of this vigilance, he remains free. Not free from love, but free within it. Not above commitment, but immune to subjugation. He remains a king, even in partnership, because the world respects the man who respects himself first. And no crown is heavier than the one placed by one's own hand. Most men do not see the chains until they've worn them for years. They enter marriage believing they will gain love, companionship, and peace. But without power, without principles, without strategy, they trade their freedom for illusion. They are ruled not by force, but by guilt. Not by violence, but by expectation. They serve silently, calling it devotion. They give endlessly, calling it love. But what is love without respect? What is peace without power? The man who does not govern himself will be governed. The man who cannot say no will live by her rules. The man who abandons his mission to please will wake up one day a stranger to himself, wondering how he became so small. Only the man who guards his edge, who plans his steps, who holds his line will remain sovereign, not cruel but clear, not submissive but strategic, not detached but disciplined. Love does not require slavery. Commitment does not require surrender. A true union is not built on the bones of a broken man, but on the strength of one who refuses to kneel. Stay sharp, stay alert, stay free.